All right, so for Module 2, we are going to talk about Chapter 2, which is putting that problem into context. That's our research problem into context and identifying and critically reviewing relevant literature. So how does the literature relate to research? All research requires relevant literature of some kind. Not all research, in the business world anyway, requires a literature review, but it does require relevant literature and should always be collecting data from professional or industry sources. So what this means is essentially that no matter what kind of research, whether it's academic or business related research, you are in fact finding data. When Nike sells a product, they don't just draw something up and send it to the factory to begin production. What they do is they look at trends, what's in right now, what's trendy right now, what supply chains are like. If there's a supply chain issue for a specific type of rubber that they would use in their shoe, they wouldn't want to design a shoe made with that rubber. So instead, they'll shift the focus of the product to meet those trends that are going on in the industry. Likewise, if maybe, let's say, the color teal is super big right now, everything is teal colored, they'll probably make a shoe that's teal colored and they'll do research to find that out. They won't just make a shoe that's blue, green, gold, all these random colors out of nowhere. They'll do it based on what they know and what the industry is like. And you need to be able to understand the answers you get from research participants. So, switching the focus back to academic research, this is stating that when you interview people, you need to be able to understand what they're saying and why they're saying it. And if you're doing a literature review, that literature review is going to help you. And again, we'll talk about that in a following week. The literature review is a collection of research articles and information that you gather about your research topic. And that information is going to give you foundational knowledge as to why your participants are responding in a particular way. So, what kind of literature should we search for? The beginning stages of your research, you should use any literature you find. My favorite place to start is Wikipedia. Now, that does not mean you should cite Wikipedia. I don't want to see any citations for Wikipedia. But if you go to Wikipedia, you'll be able to find information out there on anything related to your topic. It's often vetted, so oftentimes it is something you can use just for learning purposes to find key terms possibly for research down the line. You're not going to cite it. And at the bottom of Wikipedia, you'll find other sources that of information that you can link to. Oftentimes, there are scholarly peer-reviewed articles involved in Wikipedia. And you could use both scholarly and non-scholarly articles to help you find these key terms and information for conducting your research. What kind of literature should we search for? Well, any kind of literature in the infant stages of your research assignment will be useful. So you'll not be utilizing all of it or possibly any of it. It's information that you find out there that relates to your topic that is just helping you further understand your topic. So if you go to any website out there that talks about management styles, it's just helping you understand what the different management styles are. You're not going to cite a .com website, it's just giving you that background information. These non-scholarly articles can provide not just some key terms to get you started, but also with more foundational knowledge and core concepts of what you're trying to learn about. So if it's a specific management style, it can help you understand the different pieces of that management style. There are three types of literature sources: primary, secondary, and tertiary literature. Primary literature sources are sources that are within the company itself. So this is internal information that outside sources do not know. This is the least accessible due to information not being shared with the public. So this kind of information will be internal reports produced for just employees, not for even the board of the company or the stakeholders. It would be for managers, maybe CEOs and presidents, the CFO, to utilize to make decisions based on what they should do. So this is something that only those within the company should be able to access. Secondary literature sources, this is the information that is public knowledge that anyone should, in theory, have access to. And what I mean by that is that you need to be able to search for articles in a peer-reviewed journal, but not everyone has access to those articles because oftentimes they're hidden behind a paywall. Luckily, at Lackawanna College, we have articles we have peer-reviewed databases like ProQuest, I like to use personally, that allow us to find peer-reviewed articles, scholarly books, scholarly journals, things like that. It's easily accessible, and this includes published books, published articles, articles in journals, news media to some extent, published business articles, government articles, and things that the government states. So maybe the CDC or the World Health Organization are two that always come to mind, especially in these times, and international publications as well, things from around the world. It's classified as secondary because it is talked about and then published in these journals. So oftentimes when people do research for these articles, they actually present at conferences before they then publish their article because they want more people to come and actually hear them talk and engage in other people. Because if you read a paper about what he's going to talk about, odds are you may not want to actually go and see this person because you already know the information they're going to tell you. So it's high value but less current than primary literature sources. And that's because research takes time. It's not something that can be done in a weekend. Conducting actual research can take anywhere from a couple months to possibly a couple years, depending on the longevity of the study. And the data is more reliable than magazines or news stations, and that's because news stations or magazines can have personal bias and opinions. So, with CNN, they're a lot more on the left side of the political spectrum versus Fox News, which is on the more right side of the political spectrum. So both sides could take global warming and promote information that they want to and leave out information that they don't want to. And that's why it's not as important to use those because they could be biased. We don't want bias. We want truth. And most widely accessible databases are found right through Google using the Google Scholar search engine. Tertiary literature sources are information that come from resources like encyclopedias, dictionaries, citation indexes, and catalogs. And it helps to find secondary data because, when you go through encyclopedias or a dictionary, what have you, they might help you find key terms that will then allow you to search for more articles that are in the secondary literature sources category. So effective literature searching. So now we're going to talk about how to effectively search for literature and how to find literature sources that you would want to use in your research paper. So there's a couple stages that go along with this. And in stage one, you're going to use appropriate search terms. So search for what you do not know in Google. Like I said, trying to build up that foundational knowledge about the topic. And then it allows you to narrow your search going forward. And to narrow your search, you need to lengthen the search stream. So if you go into ProQuest, which is one of my favorite databases to use, you'll want to search flexible working arrangements. And then to make that more specific, maybe you want to search flexible working arrangements in nonprofit organizations. And then to further narrow that down, flexible working arrangements, nonprofit organizations, employee happiness. Those are things that you would find doing normal Google search. There are different forms of spelling to consider. So when you're going through these databases, such as ProQuest, excuse me, you're going to want to use an and or function to refine your search. So saying flexible working arrangements and employee happiness. Or if it's in terms of spelling, there's spelling that is different from the United States as compared to England. So you would search for this word or this word based on the spelling because we're not just considered or interested in articles that are written in the United States. We're interested in articles written around the world. That opens up a lot of doors for us. Once you know your search terms, start filtering through the sites. Like I said before, you're going to want to use .edu, .gov, or sometimes .org websites. And that's because a lot of the times these types of websites are run by organizations that are pushed into having the most up-to-date current material possible. So, the IRS tax website you would go to for the most up-to-date information on tax changes that apply to you, rather than just going onto, say, Reddit and searching for the most up-to-date tax code on there, because anybody could post on there, but the IRS is vetted by IRS tax professionals. Stage two, now that you have your terms, you're going to be looking into the databases. So now you're fully switching into using something like ProQuest. And this is where you're going to use those more specific terms you learned in stage one. So if your title or abstract sounds, so when you go through and you find articles through ProQuest, if the title or the abstract sounds useful, you'll want to click to see if the full text is available to you. And if it is available, you're going to want to download it and start reviewing the information related to that. The abstract gives you a lot of good information about the article, a good quick snapshot or summary of what the article is about, and that'll tell you, does this really relate to what I'm interested in researching? So I personally recommend finding 3 to 5 articles at a time when doing your reading or / note taking. And that's because you can more quickly find themes within these literature sources because you're going back and forth. So if the full text isn't available, what you're going to do then is you're going to want to go to Google or Google Scholar, take some notes on the abstract itself and the title of the research page. Go to Google or Google Scholar, type it in, see if you can find it somewhere that's free and available to you. Some librarians can do an interlibrary loan. That's depending on if our library can do it or not. I'm not sure, but I know some libraries, such as the University of Scranton, which has a lot more resources, I will add into that, and that's why they can do this, will reach out to other libraries that have access to specific articles if they do not have access to it, to loan it to you for a set period of time. And as a reminder, this does take time. Diamonds are not made under pressure, but good quality literature reviews are not. I'm sorry, diamonds are made under pressure. Good quality literature reviews are not. So this is just me saying, don't wait till the last minute to begin any of the assignments related to this class, as it'll be very difficult, and I don't want to see you struggle. So how do we know when we found enough? And when I say enough, I mean enough literature, enough data. And there's no right or wrong answer to this question. When the articles that you find begin referencing back to similar articles, ideas, or research papers, you may have found enough data. If you're still discovering more angles to the research, and this is saying like different lenses to your topic that you're searching, you may have to refine your topic to be a little bit more specific. Or you could just continue to search based on the topic that you have now. However, if you're finding 8,000 articles related to your topic, maybe it's time to get a little more specific, because maybe your topic is already well researched enough that there's no point in redoing the research that already exists. So you're going to want to read articles about the core fundamentals your research articles are referencing. So going back to those articles and finding out and learning what those foundational core aspects are. And this will be helpful in becoming a master in that domain. So learning all that you can about that topic. So how up to date should your references be? Modern issues require modern information. I love this quote because you don't want to look at information that's 40 years old, because the world is way different than it was 40 years ago. We've changed so much, evolved so much as a society, between laws that we've put up and struck down, different laws for taxes, everything like that. And that has really shaped our world. So we need the most up-to-date information we can get. And that's because we need to stay on top of trends. Trends change, especially in the business industry. And older articles, they're not bad or useless, but as time goes on, trends in the industry change, and thus the articles are superseded by more relevant articles. Maybe your research paper calls for looking back on the trends that were set in, the business industry back in 1990s, but your whole research paper shouldn't utilize articles from that time period. Your textbook says within the last 3 years, but I think it's reasonable to to do within the last 5 to 6 years, 6 years being the maximum, because like I said before, it does take time to do research, and within the last 3 years, that's going to really, really narrow down what you're able to find. And out-of-date news-related items are useless and should be avoided as much as possible. The nature of your study may help determine how old your articles should be. So, critiquing a published article. So now we're getting into, analyzing and critiquing articles that we're finding. So you need to critically think about what the article is talking about, and doing so can be very challenging because they are very high concept at times, and we really need to break it down into its fundamental concepts, and from there we can then critique and summarize these articles for the annotated bibliography that's due this week. So some questions to consider asking yourself if you have difficulty critically thinking about something else are: what is this paper talking about? What is this paper trying to show me? And what are the key aspects that are involved in this paper, and the key aspects that involve my specific research field or topic? So things to keep in mind when gathering reference material: it's important to write down as much information as possible. You don't want to have to go back and re-find articles that you already found, or re-find websites that you're already planning on using, because that just takes time, and you are already pressed for time writing these articles. So write down your references as soon as you get them. So do it sooner than later, and that's because that'll just save you time in the long run. Make sure you get the information about the article slash publication, such as the volume, the volume number, or the issue number. And that's because this will help you cite the article in something like Purdue OWL or Citation Machine later on down the line. You're going to make a note of the date you accessed the article. That's also important. You're going to write down your reactions, and the reason this would be a good idea is because this allows you to view what your thought process was when you first read the article. So let's say you review and critique an article and write down your reflection of it 3 days ago. Well, now you're trying to do the annotated bibliography, or maybe even write a portion of the literature review. Well, you don't want to have to reread everything. So giving a summary to yourself can help, but also your reactions will help put you in the same mindset that you were in when you first read that article. And the last slide: should you include your own opinions? Now, it is good to have opinions, but you shouldn't share those opinions in your paper. This influences the paper's results and your trajectory for what you're researching. You need to remove as much of your belief and as bias as possible. You should form your own opinions to discuss your research results outside of the classroom with other outside of your paper, to discuss in a classroom or with other experts at a conference. That's because you're allowed to have an opinion outside of the paper. But for the purposes of the paper, you need to remove your opinion and bias, and that's because you want to make sure your paper is as subjective as possible.